All right, good afternoon. We are going to jump right into session 2. I'm going to start by doing a quick recap of last week, just because everything kind of builds upon itself, and people could be watching this for the very first time. So I'll start with a little recap and go over the series in general. Let me make sure my screen is all ready. It looks like it is. All right, I am going to just hop in. So thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to be talking about AI and the K-5 setting. We broke this webinar series into K-5 and 6 through 12 because during our pilot this year, we have identified some challenges, differences that we didn't necessarily expect when implementing AI tools in the classroom. So we're going to kind of share some of our experiences and give advice on how to build literacy, AI literacy specifically, and then safe policies. So we'll start by understanding AI in the K-5. If you followed me last session, you know that I'm a lover of acronyms. So we will be following a new acronym for K-5 called the SAFE framework, just an easy way to approach implementation for K-5, AI literacy and policies, best practices and hands-on strategies, and then wrap up for next steps. So again, my name is Marlee Strawn. I'm the co-founder of Scholar Education, but honestly, I'm an educator at heart. I started in the classroom, moved my way through school administration, was a founding principal. So I built a school from the ground up here in the Tampa Bay area. And now I am the co-founder at Scholar, where we aim to deliver personalized lessons for every student for every lesson plan. And we do that with BaxterBot and Professor Bruce, our 2 AI assistants. Now, just a slight recap from last week, kind of the why behind why we're launching this series. Well, first of all, it's the time of year where people tend to begin to look for policies for next school year. And it's the time of year to start reassessing and planning. So we thought, all right, good time of year for, just planning purposes. It is, we have AI Literacy Day at the end of the month too. So we're kind of gearing up for that. But honestly, it comes down to the fact that AI is the fastest growing adopted technology. And I shared statistics like 86% of students are using it. 60% of teachers are using it. 71% of employers are expecting people to have AI skills when applying for jobs. But policy is immensely lagging. Like we mentioned last week, there's essentially only 2 states, Tennessee and California, that actually have laws that say districts have to create a policy. 26 states have created guidance and recommendation on how you should create policy, but it's not necessarily a requirement that you do so just yet. It's coming, though. I think we can all agree that it is going to be required because it is very quickly, it's like I mentioned, the fastest adopting technology, but it's very quickly changing the classroom, and it's changing the way that we have to approach technology. So that's the why, and that's why we started with the overview last week of the frame found work, which is foundations, conduct your parent, student, staff surveys, create a task force around them, and start reviewing your current policies. Let's address the risks. So have a conversation about risks for teachers and students and what the expectations around those risks are. Let's realign our policies around, realign our policy around technology in general to include AI, specifically addressing, requirements like FERPA and COPA and IDA and whatnot. What did you say? Sorry, I'm muting somebody, sorry. So, and then managing AI implementation. So train your staff, pilot AI tools, and then just ensure the ethical AI use, transparency, fairness. So that's just a very quick overview of last week. I encourage you, if you didn't watch last week's, go ahead and do so because it goes over all of these in details. I also just want to remind everyone, and you know what, I want to actually make sure that everybody has access to this presentation. So that is here. So I am going to put that in the chat real quick. And I'm going to pin it in case we have some questions later. So you have access to this presentation, but also last week I shared this document with everyone that is linked here. So let me put that in the chat as well. This is a document that I put together in collaboration with ChatGPT Deep Research. So a perfect example of being a policy being transparent of when AI is being used, not claiming that all of that research was done on my own type of thing. But this is a very detailed document. So if you go to that link, the bit.ly that I shared last week as well, you can have access to all of the kind of deeper research surrounding my advice on implementing AI policies. So let's jump into, what makes K-5 unique and why we kind of separated it out. I think, very logically, we understand that K-5 students have very different needs than 6 through 12. I mean, we're talking about students who potentially don't have reading and writing skills. They might not have computer literacy skills at all. I mean, and I'll be honest, this actually hits really home to me because I have a kindergartner. So I have a little guy who, came home for the very first time and said that he used a computer to take a test. This was all new to him, right? So when I put all of my thoughts together on this advice, I was really coming from the practical standpoint of an educator, but also from a mom and some of the things that, I think about with my son, who is going to grow up in a world who really doesn't know anything different than being immersed with AI. He's already immersed with AI from, using Alexa or, getting recommendations on a YouTube channel for different things. There's a lot of AI already surrounding us, and we don't necessarily categorize it in the same way that we categorize generative AI and tools that use generative AI technology in the classroom. So obviously they just have unique needs, and that's why we're, separating them out. So how should AI be integrated into K-5? Well, we need to focus on AI literacy. We need to focus on how tools can enhance learning, and then we need to think about ethical considerations. So we'll break that down a little bit more, and we do that with this SAFE acronym. So SAFE acronym stands for S, setting clear boundaries and expectation. So define AI's role and limitations in the K-5 learning setting. Age appropriate AI literacy. F is for family and teacher engagement. So equip parents and educators to support responsible AI use. And then E is establish safe and accessible AI practices. Address usability challenges for non-readers, for example, ensure compliance with the laws that we mentioned earlier and on the last session as well. So let's break that down a little bit more. So S is for setting clear boundaries and expectations. So now, last session we talked about building a task force and all of those things to do to start building out your policy. Well, this is like the next step. So you've already have your task force, you already have done your surveys, you've already done like a lay of the land, and now you're going to start kind of segregating it out depending on your school setting on the different needs of your students. So, AI should be used as a tool and not replace human interaction. I know that kind of sounds obvious, but I think it's important for us to make that clear to students as well. So you think to yourself, a baker has a lot of tools that they use to do their job, right? We should explain that AI is just another tool that we can use to learn, or to, the teachers can use to help them in their learning process. At the end of the day, the most important part of the classroom setting, and I would even argue, especially in K-5, is the teacher. I've always said, like, at K-5, the teacher can make it or break it in the classroom because they are the most important person in that room for those students. So, educators need to have clear guidelines, and that's why it's important to have this conversation about policy. Now, I shared the statistic about 60% of teachers are using AI, but if you break it down into K through 5 and 6 through 12, it's really about only 30% of elementary teachers. And I think there's a variety of reasons. I think partly is a lot of K-5 instruction is focused on, like, the basics, like getting a good foundation, the reading, the writing, arithmetic skills, like the very basics that teachers might not connect the dots and how AI plays a role in that. It very much can, and I'll share definite clear examples of that along the way today. But I think that's part of it, is elementary teachers just don't see how their standards or their curriculum fits into, using an AI tool. The other thing I think is, based on my own experience with our pilot, is a lot of times 6 through 12 schools are one-to-one schools, so meaning every kid has a device, but elementary schools aren't. And that's what we're experiencing at our pilot schools. In fact, we don't have any K-2 classrooms in our pilot that are one-to-one school or one-to-one classrooms. But what they do usually is they have a class, or they'll have like a set, so 5 or so computers or Chromebooks, most likely, Chromebooks or iPads that they have in the room, so that when they do their learning stations, that's when they can create like a technology station. So, an example could be that one of the stations is the teacher-led instruction, right? The independent practice station. And then one could be using an AI tool. In fact, that's what we see a lot in our pilot. So this is just kind of like an example of how, like, elementary teachers are starting to use it, but statistics are showing that elementary teachers have not adopted AI in their classroom as much as the others have. So when setting clear expectations, we really need to define what AI's role is in the K-5 setting, and then be very clear about its limitations. Ways that AI can support K-5 students is personalized learning assistance. AI can adjust to a child's learning pace and offer targeted support for reading, math, and problem solving. Some examples here, when we're talking about, personalized support, when you're looking at tools, like what we do at Scholar Education, for example, is we program in all of their reading levels into our AI assistant. So when the student interacts with this assistant, he has context about the student's learning, academic reading level based on state assessments. So then it's tailored to that individual student, that assistance from Baxter Bot, our AI tutor. Now, another example is that we're seeing a lot in the classroom is, and this kind of goes with the third point on here as well, is, some of the most challenging things for students, not only just in K-5, but in 6 through 12 too, is how does what we're learning apply to the real world? And that part of the lesson planning process can be really challenging too. So what we're seeing a lot in our pilot is that, for example, math, which tends to be the most challenging subject area to implement technology in traditionally, they're using AI to help the students apply it to the real world. So AI is coming up with those ideas about how it can apply to the real world, and then giving them some, and then questioning them about it, so that the student has a clear understanding of what am I learning right now, and how does it apply to what I will be doing in real life. That's another example. Moving on, and this is something we see a lot, is text-to-speech, speech-to-text. So traditionally before AI, and some technologies have had this for a little bit, but traditionally we were seeing speech-to-text and text-to-speech really just accessible in the traditional classroom for students who had it in their 504 or IEP plan, or even an English language learner. Well, with AI, it can help non-readers, like kindergarteners, like my son, for example, and the kindergarteners in our pilot. It can help them have AI tutoring and AI assistance without necessarily having to use the computer in a traditional sense. So, the students in our kindergarten program recently, we did a visit, and they were practicing rhyming with Baxterbot, and they don't know how to read necessarily. They don't know how to type necessarily. And they were able to have an entire conversation about rhyming, coming up with ideas, presenting it to Baxterbot giving them feedback, all verbally because of the text-to-speech, speech-to-text technology being built in. So that's another example. And if you have students who are nonverbal, like another great use case that happened recently in our pilot is we have students who are special education. In fact, 50% of them are. And recently, a teacher communicated to us that a completely nonverbal autistic student who had never asked a question all year and joined our pilot at the beginning of January, so second semester, had now been asking questions to Baxterbot. So it gave the teacher insights on where the student was at in their learning process for the very first time. So there are some amazing use cases with younger kids using technology, AI technology in the classroom. Another way could be interactive storytelling. Students could actually create stories alongside of AI, giving it feedback, coming up with ideas, makes it a little bit more engaging when it's a story that they created. And sometimes, with the help of an AI assistant to work along the way. One of my favorite opportunities for AI is multi-learning, multimodal learning support. So what that means is you can provide, audio, visuals, interactive responses so that you're able to assess students in multiple ways. So it's not just writing and getting feedback. It could be listening to the student and AI can give feedback on them reading or answering a question. It could be them writing on an interactive digital whiteboard. AI can assess that and give them feedback. These are all opportunities that we have now with AI technology that could be really helpful in the K-5 learning environment. So, but we want to be clear about boundaries and expectations, right? So establishing AI rules, though, is really important. So I'm recommending that you create like an AI code of conduct. And this isn't just for K-5. This is going to be presented in 6 through 12 as well. But being very forthcoming. I'm going to share a little story that actually happened today. A friend of mine, she has a son in kindergarten as well. And she was telling me a lot of my mom friends will share stories about their school environment because I'm a former principal and teacher. So I can relate to a lot of their, concerns. So today, literally, I was talking to a friend. Her son was in kindergartner. He was sitting in a station, and it was an independent practice station, and he got in trouble for copying his neighbor's paper. And then what was discovered is that it was never explicitly said to the student, you can't do that. And I think this is a good example of sometimes when we assume that kids know things when they don't. So we have here a 6-year-old in kindergarten, who essentially is breaking a rule that he didn't necessarily know was a rule. Maybe it was communicated that you work by yourself, but what happened in the situation is he got stuck and he didn't know what to do and he didn't want to raise his hand. And I jokingly said to my friend, it sounds like you need a Baxterbot personalized assistant. So I was shamelessly plugging Scholar Education. But my point is we need to set really clear rules and expectations and never assume that the kids know how to use AI technology. Just like the example with the cheating in the classroom, when I'm putting that in air quotes because I wouldn't label that as cheating, but that is an example of clear rules needing to be created. So examples, I will only use AI with my teacher's permission. I will not share any personal information with AI, and I will check AI generated answers with my teacher. So things like this could make it very clear to a student when they can and cannot use different AI tools. wrapping up this is the longest word letter of the acronym, probably because it's the most important, but wrapping this up is establishing AI rules for young kids, create classroom visuals, posters, acronyms, do's and don'ts. Kids will look back at it and they will, that you see a lot of elementary classrooms that have full of visuals. Well, this is a prime example of something that you can, create in your classroom of what it looks like to have a classroom that uses AI safely. Have students and parents sign an AI use agreement to reinforce the policies that you create. And then, of course, train the teachers on how to explain the AI rules. I think that's sometimes a missing part. We sometimes even assume that the teachers know. So this, going back to my example, that's not AI related, but made me think about today. I thought to myself, well, didn't the teacher think about talking to the students about what they can, expectations for doing their own work, essentially. And then, not to go into too much detail, but I even asked my own son afterwards. I said, has your teacher talked to you about, if you're working in a group, if you can look at somebody's paper? And he said, well, not on a test. So he knew that it was like not acceptable in a test, but I didn't have any clear expectations about in a group setting. So it's just an example of very, clear boundaries and expectations for students. So that was the S in safe. Now we're going to move to age appropriate AI literacy. So obviously we're talking about kids who some have computer literacy skills and some do not. So we have to be very, very purposeful with our literacy. And I think that we have a benefit here. I'm going to kind of rewind to when the internet was introduced to schools and to the classroom, and then we became, we had computer labs, and then eventually iPads, and then we kind of were pushed to be one-to-one schools because of COVID. So now we have all this technology. And I think that the benefit that we have right now is that we know more than we knew before. And what I mean by that is when we started to use the internet, technology, tech tools, cell phones, social media, we didn't know as much that we knew now about the impact of things like screen time and the mental health effect of social media. Like, we know a lot more than we knew when all of this stuff was introduced. So I feel like what that tells me is we can be more proactive and purposeful when thinking about what we learned of past technologies like social media and how it can apply to AI. So that's something that I just really want to call out, because when I talk about age appropriate AI literacy, I think we can all agree that there's a basic understanding of what appropriate like screen time use is and how often they should use technology. And we don't expect kids to be on a device all the time. That's part of the reason why we don't see one-to-one, as often in the K-5 setting. So we need to come from that lens of like learning from the past and putting some age appropriate literacy in place. So when I think about that, we want to make sure that K-5 students, all students, but we're talking about K-5 here, know what AI is. For example, I had the discovery when I was creating this is I don't think I've ever talked to my son about what Alexa is and how she works. He literally might think she's a woman that's listening to us every time we ask a question. Like, these are the things that we don't really think about because we're so immersed in it. And they're definitely not thinking about it because they're so immersed in it and they're growing up with it. We want to explain that it is not a human. We want to make sure that they know it's not magic. We want to be very purposeful in how we explain that it's a computer program, essentially, and that it's trained to replicate human-like conversation. But it's definitely not human. It's not going to have the same emotional awareness that we are going to have. We're not going to know if you're sad, right? AI is not going to know if you're sad or if you're feeling down or something like that. So We want to introduce AI concepts in ways that build like curiosity and problem solving and critical thinking. And we really want to think about the things we've learned from the past, and also assume, again, going back to my first point, assume that the students and kids don't know how this technology works, and we introduce it in a very age appropriate way. So I'll give a little bit more tangible steps here. So what is AI? AI is a tool that helps with tasks. I mentioned like the baker who's going to use tools to help them bake. That's an example of, a way that people are using different tools. A plumber has different tools when they come and fix something. Like, it's the same kind of concept. So let's be purposeful with the word tool so that they know that there's a difference between AI and human intelligence. AI is not a person. In fact, there is actually a lot of research going on right now about how if an AI tool is posing as a human and interacting as a human, that it gets confusing for students and they aren't able to draw the line between what's real and what's not. And in fact, we've had some tragic examples of ways that students built very close connections with AI tools, and it ended in tragedy. So I am just being very forthcoming about recognizing and explaining to students that even Alexa, who seems like she's had a computer listening to us all the time, it's not a person. It's a computer program that's trained on how to help us, and it's just a tool that can help us do things like play music and put a timer on for when we are baking. And really just follows patterns. And over time, a lot of times these AI tools will get to know your patterns. And that's helpful, again, as a tool, because it's starting to recognize patterns and help you. But at the end of the day, it goes back to that word tool. And then, I mentioned Alexa smart cameras. So every time you open up your phone and you use your camera, that's an example of AI technology. And your students might be using some form of AI in their classrooms already, and might not have the context. So maybe it's, especially with those older, like 4th and 5th graders, maybe we just start having conversations about, are you using AI? Like, I would probably start with that question. Do we know what AI is? Are you using AI? They might say no. I'm thinking that they probably would, because they're not contextualizing it. Just like I had that aha moment with my son not being able to recognize that Alexa's not a woman. I'm going to tell him that tonight, by the way. But when I was working on preparing for this today, I'm like, that's like a moment where I need to have that conversation with my own son. And then the other thing is the importance of human oversight. So that's why one of the recommendations for the rules and the expectations was like, I will still get my teacher to check my work, and I'm only going to use AI when my teacher allows me to, because we need to double check, and it definitely can make mistakes. So I'm going to just share a free resource that we have. So this could be for any schools if you want to get an idea of how we at Scholar Education are teaching AI literacy. You can go to our website, joinscholar.com, go to resources tab, and there's a free AI literacy course. It's it says an hour. It's really not an hour. It's a series of 6 modules, and it's like 3 to 5 minute videos, and then a quick little quiz at the end. You could do that with your whole classroom. You could take a look at it for inspiration. It really depends on kind of your lens. You could do it with your student if you're a parent. So, a lot of flexibility there, but check it out if you're looking for free resources. I feel like it's one of the only ones that focuses on the student. A lot of them are focusing on the teacher, which we have one of those too, spoiler alert. Focusing more on tangible tips for age-appropriate AI literacy. You could play Is It AI game show. Show students AI generated things versus real images, and have conversations around that and have them guess which one is real, which one's not. Use teacher-led discussions to explore how voice assistants understand questions, and then talk about how AI doesn't have feelings and decision, emotional decision making like people do. Move a little bit further into this like 3 to 5 grade level would be decision making. So explore how AI makes predictions and why it's sometimes getting things wrong. Have students co-create with, I used the example of stories earlier, and then have a debate. Simple questions on whether AI should be able to help things like grading homework or making art, and talk about the ethical, relation to whether or not AI does a variety of tools or a variety of tasks for us. So just being really forthcoming with students, because like I said, they're already immersed with this technology. And if they don't understand how it works, then we're putting them, at a deficit. So that was the A, so SA, and then F, family and teacher engagement. Providing AI training, we talked about that the first session as well. And I think it's primarily important because elementary teachers, like I said, are less likely to use AI right now. So I think sharing with them tangible examples of how AI can assist them in the classroom to help their students is really important. So offer PD workshops, be sure to establish ongoing training as well. So when you're looking at tools, I have to be honest, if they're just offering you like a training session at the beginning, and then it's like off to the races, like most ed tech tools. I mean, I'm a former principal. That's my experience, pre-planning training, and then everybody starts to use it. And what sometimes would happen, it would go into the ed tech graveyard because the teachers didn't have time to really get acclimated with it, or they needed ongoing training and it just wasn't part of, the agreement. I would ask about that when you're considering partnerships with AI companies and AI tools, because AI is evolving very quickly. So it would be nice when you have a partnership to have an ongoing professional development partnership as well. You can check out our free AI champion course. So this is basically a way that you can get acclimated. So if you know a K-5 teacher who hasn't dabbled in AI, it's a great place to start. Very quick, very easy. Tells you about how the technology works, how to use it. It's not scholar related at all. Neither of these are. They are all just like how to use AI in general. Family is really important as well. Help parents feel informed, help them feel confident with their own child's use of AI. Send home guidance if you can, like what is AI? They could be in that category of not using these tools. So they don't know if their students are using it. And especially if a kid, which, less likely in the K-5 setting, but if they're using social media, Facebook, which the kids aren't using Facebook, but Instagram, TikTok, all of the Snapchat, there's AI embedded in each one of those. So even if a parent doesn't think that they're using like something like ChatGPT, they are using it in those in the same manner, like it's set up in the same manner as ChatGPT, but just built into the platform. So we have to be really forthcoming with parents too. I would recommend hosting information nights. In fact, I'm at Pepin Academies, one of our partner schools right now, because tonight Scholar Education is going to be at their college and career fair, and we're going to be sharing ways that students can use AI as a college and career coach. So partner, with companies and partner with tools that want to help you and guide you along those ways as well, so that you can answer concerns that parents might have. And the last one in SAFE is E, establish safe and accessible AI practices. So asking the right questions about privacy laws and accessibility needs to the tools that you are using. And that goes back to that last session I did about establishing a list of approved vendors, so approved ed tech tools, and then having a process to get approved. So when a teacher comes to you because they found a great tool or something, but it's not on the list, you want to make sure your teachers know that there is a approved list, but B, you want to know that the teachers have a process to potentially get a new tool evaluated. So some action steps. Ban AI tools that are going to collect any data. I think that goes without saying, but I think a lot of AI policy is we don't want to ignore the obvious because sometimes it gets forgotten. So ensure AI learning platforms are following FERPA, does not store student data. So that's a great question to ask any tools that you're vetting is where does the student data go? How are you integrating AI into your tool? What large language models are you using? How are you protecting the student data? Provide accessibility supports. So you want to make sure these tools have the built-in features that I mentioned earlier. Text to speech, speech to text. These are pretty much a non-negotiable. And I would recommend that you really evaluate them. They might say they have it, but evaluate it for the user experience, because sometimes the text to speech, speech to text can be really clunky and not intuitive. So I would evaluate it for how how the user experience is. So put yourself in that kindergartner, my son, seat and be like, okay, is this easy for them to use? And then one of the recommendations we had was, especially for classrooms, like who will be dependent on text to speech, speech to text, headphones with a microphone with clear voice interaction, because a classroom can be really hard if it picks up other noise. That's just like a logistics thing that we discovered in our pilot as well. So just a quick recap: safe, set clear boundaries, expectations, age-appropriate AI literacy, family and teacher engagement, and then establish safe and accessible AI practices. We would love to connect with you. We're expanding our pilot. So if you want to join our waitlist or share it with somebody or get a demo of our platform where you can see how we provide personalized learning for every lesson plan, please, these QR codes, feel free to scan them. You also have access to all of our socials and our ways to get a hold of us. The next Thursday is going to be 6 through 12, very near and dear to my heart as well, because I was a high school teacher, high school principal. In fact, I was an APC for a 6 through 12 as well. So even within the 6 through 12 setting, there's different challenges as well. So next week, we're going to go a little bit deeper. The biggest focus I think that we will talk about is there's less of a focus on integrity and cheating concerns in the K-5 setting, and more of a focus of that in the 6 or 12 setting. So we're going to talk about that because I know that's a big narrative and concern around 6 through 12 use as well. And then our last session, which will be the week of AI Literacy Week, or AI Literacy Day, should I say, it will be from policy to practice. We'll talk about challenges and return on investment. So thank you so much. I will hop back into the chat to see if there's any questions. If there aren't any questions, I'm actually going to stop it so I can save the recording.